Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's helped them along the way, and how they're bringing others alongside them. Today's episode is episode 11 of season 1, and I am your host, Tim Vogel. Today we're speaking with Scott Papay of Long Building Technologies. Hi, Scott. How are you? Welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. So has anyone else called you a genius before, or is this the first time?
This might be the first time.
All right. Well, congratulations. Yeah. I'm still waiting for the first time someone calls me a genius, but we'll get there. So Scott, I'm so glad you're here. I've appreciated so many times that we've had some good conversations. I always feel like we peel some layers back. And so as we were going into this project, I just thought it would be great. And then when we met up a couple weeks ago and you were totally open to it, I was like, well, all right, 2 thumbs up. Let's do it. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what you're spending your time on these days.
Yeah, so I am a sales leader at Long Building Technologies, and we are a multi-state, western, kind of northwestern United States building automation contractor, along with mechanical equipment rep firm, as well as security solutions. So we're a very kind of diversified business and also offer service along those lines. And so my primary role is to guide our sales team. The traditional title for these roles would be sales manager, and I kind of object to that term. I feel like I've been blessed to work with a really amazing team of people that don't really need to be managed because they manage themselves. It's really more about leading them, providing vision. I like to use the analogy of like guardrails. Use guardrails for them and let them play on the field, if you will, within those guardrails. And so my primary responsibility lies in the geographic territory of Colorado, but within Long's organization, since Colorado is the largest of our offices and our oldest office, if you will, as an organization, that we have a tremendous amount of influence throughout the entire organization, direction, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And how many offices does Long have?
So we're in 8 states. And as far as physical locations, I think we have 13 or 14 offices, ranging from Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado. I might be forgetting one. Basically, we have like Colorado North. We have like Colorado Northwest with Idaho kind of neatly cut out. So, Idaho, we're coming for you.
Yeah, watch out.
We have you surrounded.
Yeah, and so then how many employees across those 8 states are you guys running?
We're just shy of 500.
Yeah. So you are by no means a small organization. And oftentimes we talk to we talk to system integrators all the time. They're in trade shows, whatever. 500 employees that's a good sized organization.
Yeah, and just to slice that a little bit more, that's the totality of our entire organization, right? That ranges from finance to human resources to IT and executive leadership, equipment sales, and contracting, right? And so if you were to slice that down into traditionally what we would be talking to a system integrator about, that would be around 2 to 250 employees, about half the organization.
How long has Long been around now?
Since 1965, so 57 years. It was founded by a great visionary man named Wills Long, and he started out as just really what we would call in the industry a sheet metal rep. So buying and reselling grills, registers, and diffusers to mechanical contractors. And It just grew from there as he picked up other mechanical lines of equipment. And then in mid 90s, Long, the equipment rep firm, purchased a controls business kind of outright in Denver called Winter and Associates. And some of those employees are actually still with us today, 20 plus years later. So that's kind of how Long got into the building automation business back in the mid 90s.
Yeah, there's certainly a legacy there.
A big legacy. And, back then it was Robert Shaw and Barbara Coleman and legacy proprietary type products. And then in the late 90s, when Tritium was first announced, we were the first company in the Western Hemisphere that signed up with Tritium. Mark Ballant and some of the other people in our controls business internally really saw the promise of open protocols and what that meant to the marketplace. And we signed up. I think we've got the number 2 contract ever written with Tritium, believe it or not. We missed it only by time zone differences. Someone in the Southeast Asia, I think, got the first contract. So we're really proud of that, because we brought that what had been promised for so long about open protocols and bringing different communication systems together. Long really brought that to our markets.
How long have you been with Long, Scott?
So I started in Long in 2009, so a little over 13 years. Wow, it's gone by fast.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. What were you brought on to do back in 2009?
Yeah, so I started out as a salesperson at Long. I'd come from Train prior to that, and at Train I was in sales and kind of backing up, if you, as it were, if that makes sense at this
Yeah,
point
yeah,
in the conversation. Yeah, maybe it makes sense for me to start at the beginning,
yeah.
just briefly, to kind of give you the arc of my career. Uh, Started out in right out of high school, went into the Navy, and was a machinist mate. And that's like, I like to use the analogy of Scotty on the Enterprise. So we ran the machinery on the ship. I wasn't a machinist like we would traditionally think of, where I was running a mill and a lathe. I was running the machinery. So the boilers, the pumps, the turbines, the generators, the distilling plants, the machinery, the ventilation, the heating, the air conditioning. And after I got out of the Navy, I went to go work for a heating and air conditioning company and started putting in residential sheet metal in homes, like installing sheet metal, and then went to light commercial installation. And I remember uh, this was in my early 20s, and I'm hanging sheet metal after shoveling snow off of the ductwork, the pile of raw ductwork that needed to be installed in the ceiling overhead. And because whoever the sheet metal person is putting in the heating and air conditioning a building, usually the building's open, it may not even be dried in, and there is no heating and air conditioning because I'm the one putting it in. And so I remember busting my hump all winter long putting in this commercial heating and air conditioning system. And at the very end of it all, I didn't know this at the time because I was just putting it in per the plans, and didn't quite understand how it all worked. But at the very end, it was kind of this complex system, and there was this big huge duct that went straight from the supply back into the return. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, that can't possibly be right. And then at the very end, after all winter long, like, I got scars on my fingers. You had to go get, stitches from cuts from sheet metal and everything else. And I'm wearing my Dickies overalls, and got the whole thing right. A guy in a little button down Oxford shirt comes in with a 5-gallon bucket and a laptop, and in like 3 or 4 hours he programs this what I now know to be a changeover bypass system, a VVT system. He worked for Johnson Controls.
Ah,
And I'm like, this guy, after I blood, sweat, and tears all winter long, this guy comes in for like 4 hours and does this really cool thing and takes control of this system that I just installed. And I'm like, I need that guy's job.
and he gets all the glory. I got it working.
Exactly. Exactly. And so the very next day, I hopped in my van, like my service van with the ladder rack on top and, all the whole thing. And I literally drove right to the Johnson Controls branch and walked in the front door and applied for a job. I'm like, how do I get a job here? And I got an interview like set up the next day, and I got hired by a man named Jim French. I don't know if some of you may know Jim French. Jim French actually works. He was a project manager in the Denver branch at the time, and of Johnson Controls, and then he went on to be a corporate person for Johnson Controls and has had several other business ventures, and he's still in the industry today. Still is a man of great influence. Works for one of KMC's competitors. I remember he hired me and gave me a laptop. I had never had a laptop before, and he brought me out to my first job. It was the police and fire and city municipal building for Golden, Colorado, where the Coors Brewery is, the same city where the Coors Brewery is. And he's like, got up on a ladder, showed me how to plug in the laptop to a VAV box. I didn't even know what a VAV box was or how it worked. And he's like, he just showed me. It was like, threw me in the deep end, sink or swim. Like, here's HVAC Pro, which was the old Johnson Controls configuration program. And I picked it up fairly quickly and went on to be what we would it was called a system rep, but that's a technician for Johnson Controls. And then while I was working for Johnson Controls, they had a really great tuition reimbursement program at Johnson. And so I was working during the day and going to school at night. And I was married at the time, and it, what and I had the GI Bill as well. So I had the GI Bill from being a veteran, and Johnson was reimbursing me for my tuition. And what was cool is I was working where I was going to school was University of Colorado, Denver, and their mechanical engineering department. And Johnson Controls did the controls for that campus. And so it was great. I could drive onto campus and I could park right next to the building. I didn't have to like park in the big parking structure and walk half a mile to
yeah,
the to
yeah.
class. I could just pull in, didn't have to pay for parking. I could park right next to class. I'd roll up into class with my Johnson Controls Oxford on, the whole thing. But it was great. And got my engineering degree there and uh, graduated. What was funny is I actually made money going to school. I mean, that's one of the great things about this industry is there's such a need for talent that so many companies, including Long, offer tuition reimbursement for people that come into our business that want to pursue an advanced degree uh, in a field that is associated with our industry. So between the GI Bill, tuition reimbursement, and some merit scholarships, based on good grades or whatever, I think I made several $1,000s a semester. So I actually paid my own way through college, if you will, or got paid to go to college. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you have the right shirt on, then you get free parking. That helps too. Parking's no
Right.
joke. So you were in the Navy for how long? 4 years?
Just under 4 years,
Okay.
correct. Yeah, I had gotten out. I took an early discharge because they were decommissioning the ship that I was on,
Mm.
and they were trying to downsize the Navy. And I had gotten married, and it was like, you know, it's time for me to get out. I've gotten out of this experience what I needed to, and being a married man at the time, wasn't very easy to be married and in the Navy. So
Yeah, and then you went from shoveling snow and killing your forearms, cutting sheet metal, to wearing Oxford shirts. Do is there a sense that you feel like Jim French took a chance on you, or do you think?
completely.
Yeah,
No, yeah, really, really want to give him credit. I mean, I, I rolled up in the interview again in that service van from Belco Sheet Metal Corporation, and I had literally like Dickies overalls on. I had like the all my little sheet metal like scribes and different things like in my bib overall basic type things, and he totally took a huge chance on me, but he believed in me and he saw something and he's like, here's a laptop, here's your tools, and brought me out there and literally he spent half a day with me at this job, an important job, right? It's a courthouse, fire station, police station, whatever. And he's like, here's a rooftop, here's a VAV, here's how it works, explained it, and he left. And part of it was him believing in me. Part of it is some of my inherent, understanding and I guess just how I grew up around equipment and machines and tractors and understanding how things work. A lot of it also I have to credit the Navy with just an incredible education and how systems work and how machinery works. And the schooling and training there is unlike any. And so finished my degree at Johnson Controls and was a technician, and I went to my boss and I'm like, okay, like I got my degree now, I want a promotion. And he's like, it doesn't work that way. Little young and naive, but I had a professor who had some connections in the industry, and one of my professor's former students had an industrial controls company down in Atlanta, Georgia, called Tiernan and Petrilo, and they were doing uh, conversions of polyisocyanuride foam, which is that kind of rigid foam board that they use for like roofing and building insulation. Those plants used to use refrigerants, like ozone eating refrigerants to as the blowing agent, right? As the expansion agent to make the rigid foam board. And they were converting those to pentane, right? Which is like white gas, like Coleman fuel, if you will, very explosive. So I got a chance to get into industrial controls working in, class one, div one type spaces with, intrinsically safe barriers and working with those things.
how long were you in industrial controls then?
2.5 years or so. And then 9/11 happened and a lot of those conversions and the whole, kind of economy crash. And then I went back to working in HVAC. So I went from being a project manager, engineering manager in this industrial controls group. So controls technician to engineering manager, managing people really for the first time in my life, to project manager at Train, Atlanta Train, Georgia Train. Uh, and then from there, I went into corporate productivity. I was like a Six Sigma black belt and would travel around to different fulfillment offices and work on their processes, and so did a lot of process improvement in their offices, district offices around the country, and then decided that I wanted to stop traveling and I wanted to start making some more money. And I looked around and I said, who are the people in my business that really make the most money and seem to have the most fun and are perpetually challenged by their job? And it's like salespeople. And to me, it was, well, what's challenging about it? I always found machinery and systems and controls and pumps and tech to be interesting and something that's ever evolving, but something that for me I felt like I had a pretty good handle on, or it's something that it is a craft or a skill that actually could be mastered, was my experience of it. And I was the kind of person, or am the kind of person, I couldn't picture myself being a master craftsman. I am the kind of person, I always want to be pushing my edge or envelope as to, I think I'm most comfortable being challenged, perpetually challenged. And so I was like, what's the most challenging thing? People. People are the most challenging thing, right? Whether it's in sales or management. And so I decided that I wanted to get into sales. And so I started in sales at Train in Colorado. So I worked for Rocky Mountain Train. And then from there, I ended up at Long as a salesman. And then from there, I've come into the role that I'm in now as sales leader.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It's so interesting also because you have such a diverse background. And again, you see the mechanical side of you, you see the sheet metal side, and then you start learning the technician side. I love the Oxford shirt and the laptop, right? And you're working through that, and then you go into project management and industrial controls. And you said Six Sigma, so like lean processes and like that's like a different
Yep.
mindset altogether from something than like sales. I feel like. I mean, is that?
It is.
Yeah. I mean, so how do you make that shift? Like, is it just you have a diverse gifting, or is it this perpetual challenge that
Mm.
you're always looking for? But that's not an easy thing. That's like saying I went from CFO to VP of sales. Then something doesn't line up there.
Yeah, I think for me it was, I, as a project manager, I was a really good project manager at Atlanta Train, and was saw the opportunity to improve processes just locally. And I think I always just kind of had a knack for business process, if you will, and seeing it from a higher level and how to dissect it. And so for me, it was, how do I get into that skill? And I had met, um, I worked for a man named Chris Cutcliffe while I was there, and he knew a gentleman named Greg Hartley. And these are two, Chris was the best operations manager I had ever seen. And still to this day, he's just had such a knack, and I learned so much from him about how to run a group of people, how to run projects, and break down what seems to be this really complex process of how to get a building built and make it, frankly, kind of almost like cookie cutter process, relatively straightforward. And he just had a calm way of managing people, and I really appreciated that. And then with him was a gentleman named Greg Hartley, and Greg is a very interesting character who has a podcast himself right now. He's had a very diversified career in, believe it or not, in intelligence and counterterrorism and espionage. And he worked in Army intelligence and interrogation. And he is kind of like the human lie detector, if you will. And so he was also a very good project manager that had worked for Chris. And Greg met me and saw something in me again that he wanted to uh, expound upon, because he was part of this Six Sigma lean group, this kind of tiger team that would go around office to office within Train's organization and work on improving their processes.
So it seems like Six Sigma and all of that really led in the process, like you said, of understanding how the business is the business works and the financials and what's important, especially on the project management side. But let's go back to being the sales leader for an organization with a team of salespeople under you. You said that you have a great team, and based on conversations we've had, you've really tried to prioritize on building that great team and making sure that they're equipped. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you do or that you've done to help build such a great and amazing sales team?
I'm chuckling because I don't know that it's anything I've done per se beyond recognizing talent and hiring well. That would be the number one thing that I really believe I can take credit for is I've I as a salesperson before I was a sales leader, I met some other great salespeople in the industry, one of whom works for me right now, but he was working for a competitor. His name is Tyler Martin. And I'm like, this is the kind of man that I want to work with. This is the kind of person I want to surround myself with. We I need we need long needs people like Tyler on our team. And so I spent 3 years as a salesperson gently recruiting Tyler, even though he would be a peer of mine, right? And we'd run into each other on job walks and bids, and, he turned into friendly competition, good competition, right? That we'd go out for coffee or a beer and we get to know one another. And over the course of like 3 years, finally got him to come over to Long through. And so, what has Scott Papay done to, build an amazing sales team or facilitate this? It's really about, have I always gotten it right? No. I've hired people that weren't ended up a good fit for the team, whether it was in uh, their own drive or in their ethics um, or their knowledge it was really about drive. I'm the kind of manager where, again, like, I want to provide the guide rails and the vision and get out of people's way and let them do what they do. And if someone needs a ton of direction or hand holding, then I'm not the right boss for them and they're not the right person for this team. So that doesn't, I certainly provide coaching for my salespeople, right? I'm a consultant for them. Like, hey, what do you think about this deal? Or here's a challenge I'm running into with a particular owner. What would be your advice on how to handle the situation? And so I might coach them or brainstorm on things, but I by no means do I have all the answers. And I am not the best salesperson on my team. But I am not the sales leader because I'm the best salesperson. I mean, I am crystal clear about that. And I think my gift as a sales leader, again, is providing the vision and building that team. And one of my favorite stories about a salesperson is I have uh, a saleswoman who works for me, and her name is Amy Stones, and she's getting ready to retire here in 6 months. And shout out to Amy, I'm super proud of her. It's one of my most I'm most proud of her, and it's one of the things I take such great delight in as a leader was hiring her. She was a dispatcher in our service business. She not technical at all. And we had an opening on the service side of our business, on the aftermarket, because we service the buildings that we install our controls in. and we had an opening, and I just I knew I just saw the potential in her, even though she didn't believe in herself as a salesperson. I'm like, Amy, you know this business, you know the customer, you've been answering the phone as a dispatcher, right, or service coordinator, whatever role you want to call it, for years. You know the pain points for customers. You at least understand the vernacular, right? And I'm not asking you to go sell a chiller plant upgrade and how to, make buildings more efficient through advanced algorithms. I'm asking you to go sell service agreements. And then through that, you'll build the relationships so that when customers do have an upgrade project coming up, that they're going to talk to you and want you to price it up. She's like, I don't know. Right. And she's like, I don't know, and I kind of sold her on it. I sold her on it.
Well, you sold her on herself. Yeah, you gave her that encouragement and that empowerment.
Yeah, I sold her on herself, and I sold her on what I knew to be her inherent ability and intrinsic knowledge of the business. And her personality is just perfect as a salesperson. Very consultative. And she just had this very gentle, um, maybe I'll say, and this is maybe again recognizing talent, if you will, um, as a sales leader, like that. If that's my gift to the sales team, that's it. But it's like she had this very gentle kind of mother hen way about her, because I think she had to direct building engineers answering the phone, whatever, for helping problems, but then also directing the technicians to get to jobs. I was like, that's kind of a unique salesperson quality, and I bet she would kill it. Like, you need the service agreement, boiler room Bob. You really, you know, right? Like that kind of like a little, and it's been, she's crushing it.
It's like almost Jedi mind tricks. You're like, yes, I do. You're right.
And so she's crushing it. She's happier than she's ever been in her career. She's getting ready to retire. She's going to retire much more comfortably than she ever would have, had she stayed in her prior role, because she's making, two or three or four times as much as she would have, because she's killing it, and she's really, really good at her job. And so, what is it that Scott Papay brings? It's not special sales voodoo that I train my team on, and here's the special technique and the hand waving or the Sandler system, and here are the magic words you use to negotiate with customers. Right? It's really about hiring the right people that have integrity, that are hardworking, that are self-driven, um, putting people in the right places to succeed, and recognizing when people aren't a fit and giving them an opportunity to move on.
And I think sometimes those are some of the hardest conversations to have, because they're difficult, they're uncomfortable, but it's really for the good of the whole team. It's good for the company, and ultimately, it's good for them. Um, this is maybe kind of a dry question, but when you're looking at trying to find that next Tyler Martin that has the drive, the ethics, and the knowledge, when you're interviewing someone and trying to scale your team, what are some of maybe the questions that you would ask or the things you would look for that would indicate those kinds of qualities?
If I'm looking for my sales team, because of the size of the organization, we have, and I understand this is a little different maybe than some people experience, but we have a team that's more dedicated to new construction, and then we have an aftermarket service team. And so, in general, I found that the skill sets are different. So, with a new construction salesperson, I am looking for typically a degree, right? An engineer of some sort, or extensive industry experience, such that they understand how systems work, because they're calling on mechanical contractors, they're calling on engineers, and maybe they're even calling on enterprise level owners versus a service salesperson who is selling service agreements. Like those are two very different skill sets. Um, I would say that service agreement sales require someone who, in many ways, has a lot more grit and tenacity. It's a much longer sales cycle in many ways, and the dollar amounts are lower, and they're probably going to experience a lot more no's. So they need to be very resilient people. And so I really look for grit. I'll ask some questions about grit and tenacity and stick to itiveness on both sides, whether it's new construction or service. One of the real key elements that I'm looking for is someone who understands that in our business at Long, it's a couple things. One is they need to be self-driven and self-motivated, but they need to be team players. We are an organization because we also sell equipment, and we have a mechanical service group and a control service group, and we have operations. I'm looking for people who um, are very team oriented. In other words, they get along well with others. They're not lone wolves, right? They understand that a project manager who works in operations or a technician is just as important to their success as the mechanical contractor that's going to write them $1 million PO, right? So someone who has a humility in their character, someone who also understands that this business is a relationship business. This is not a one and done, haha, I sold that junky used car to someone and tricked them and get on down the road, right? I mean, I have relationships with some of my customers that are career long, which are turning into lifelong relationships, right? I know so I'm looking for people like salespeople that have that quality, that have the ability to build relationships and build bonding and rapport with contractors and engineers. And can they get to know the person they're doing business with to get to that trusted advisor place, rather than just being a bid number on bid day, or, yeah, I know you're really smart, but I don't like you. I think people do business with people they like, first and foremost. And so I'm looking for people who are charismatic, who are likable, trustworthy, who understand that sales is not a 9 to 5 job, that sales is a 24/7 type job, that, it's, yes, while sometimes they have the opportunity to entertain a customer on a golf course, they're also, and so that doesn't look like work. I've done that. For one, I'm a terrible golfer, so it's work as it starts. But two, it's like, for me, it's like I'm on, right? It's like it's still work, right? I'm trying to relate. I'm trying to make sure, are they having a good time? Because if they're having a good time, then I'm building that relationship, and then maybe that means that um, I get an advantage on bid day, right? That maybe they'll pay up for me because they trust me and they trust my team on bid day because we have that relationship. So I'm looking for salespeople that understand that, sometimes it means taking that call at 11 o'clock at night, or it means, oh, there's a last minute bid that is due. And, well, it's after 5 o'clock. You're going to have to take the plans home and finish writing your takeoff and scope tonight and get that number out tomorrow. Or, hey, right now, I'm in San Cristobal, Chiapas, Mexico, right? There are sales emails that I still need to attend to occasionally. And so there's this aspect of, I think, being always on, that a salesperson that I'm looking to interview needs to really understand. That responsiveness matters, that customers are not a nuisance or a hassle, that if you don't answer the phone or you don't get back to a customer on an email, they're picking up the phone right away. If they get your voicemail often, they might just hang up and pick up the phone and call your competitor.
Scott, I'm listening to so much of what you're saying. A lot of it can be, kind of quantified, but so much of it is qualitative, which then takes me back to the rest of the conversation we've had, where it's, somebody saw, Jim French saw something in you. You saw something in Amy. You feel like the thing that you're contributing most is recognizing talent and hiring well. You know, again, some of it can be measured, but so much of that is qualitative. How does someone foster that kind of, like, recognizing talent mentality? Because it's so easy to be like, here's the job description, here's, the requirements. Okay, you meet all these boxes. Thanks. How do you take that deeper look? I mentioned earlier, I feel like all the conversations we have, we're always peeling back just a couple extra layers and we get a little deeper. How do you foster that?
I would like to think I've gotten a little bit better over the years, but I want to fully admit that I've gotten it wrong just as almost as much as I've gotten it right. And so I think the biggest thing that I could honestly offer is a willingness to fail fast. I've hired people and recognized in less than 6 months that this is not a good fit. I saw something, I thought they were one thing that one real key piece of information I could say is a watch out for is I've hired both people who I felt were very charismatic, but then didn't have the necessary technical aptitude to really do the job well and the follow through. So I've made that mistake. I've also made the other mistake by being overly enamored with someone's resume and being like, oh, you went to school here and you have this kind of pedigree, and oh, wow, you're very intelligent. Like, I would say in a sales particular role, intelligence is important, but I would say almost emotional intelligence is more important. And so I've hired people who were very technical and um, were very impressive in their knowledge and engineering ability. And at the end of the day, they weren't great salespeople for one reason or another. Maybe customers just didn't like them, right? And so there's this aspect of, do I really like this person? Do I think other people will like this person? And here's the other thing is, like, do I feel like the person I'm interviewing, right, that I'm sitting across from the table of, do I feel like they're genuine or do I feel like they're putting on a mask for me? So I'm looking for, uh, this word is, so, uh, in the vernacular these days, but authenticity, right? Is the person I'm speaking to, do I really feel like I'm talking to a real person sitting across from me when I'm interviewing, or are they putting on an act for me, right? And I want someone who's authentic because people read through that. Again, people want to do business with people they like, and so um, and I think there's the other thing too is being willing to fail fast. I think a lot of people will hire a salesperson, train them up, get them in the organization. The biggest cost really of ramping someone up, in my experience, is exposing a company's portfolio of customers to a new person, and then that person isn't that great. It's like, oh man, now I've failed my customers, right? As a leader, I've failed my customers, and there's a cost to both the customers and the organization. So it's like, rather than keeping a poor fit on longer than is reasonable, I've let people go in relatively short order. rather than working with, trying to put on a improvement plan, working with, hey, it's like, there's some of these things I've noticed in sales. Yes, people can hone an ability, people can hone a skill, but I can't take someone who is not a salesperson and make them a salesperson if they don't inherently have it. So, yes, I saw something very special in Amy, and I happened to get it right. I thought I saw something right in other people, and I got it wrong, but then I corrected that mistake quickly. So I think as a sales leader, that's a lesson, for myself and other leaders as well, is being willing to let people move on to roles that are a better fit for them. Because if I'm unhappy with their performance, they can't possibly be happy in their job, right? Frankly, it's a gift to let people go in a job that they're not a good fit for. That was a hard lesson for me to learn as a hiring manager, right? It's like, oh, I feel so bad, and because I've been fired, like it's devastating, right? Like, how am I going to tell my partner or my family is like, oh man, I lost my job or whatever. But it's like every single one of these people now has moved on to a job that is a better fit or is closer to a better fit than the one working for me.
Well, and when you know where you stand and what you're good at and what you excel in and what you fail at, then you're better suited to know, again, what is a better fit for me? Where are the places I should go? What are the things I should focus on? What are the things I should learn? Um,
Right.
well, Scott, again, I love so much of your story and where you started and how you in a way kept your head on a swivel and was always looking for the opportunity. And now what you're doing is you're trying to build up your team and build up others and see the good in others to put them in a position that works, recognizing that failures happen and adapting and moving on as best you can. What does the rest of your career look like, do you think? What does Scott want to focus on? What's in sport? What's important to you in your career right now?
Mm, yeah, great question. And certainly I'm kind of coming into that season of my career, right, where it's like, what do I want my legacy to be? And you know, I I I feel as if certainly we're looking to get down into brass tacks. We have some very uh, blocking and tackling things that we want to grow and expand on in our business, right? So we are really focusing on what I believe to be the next evolution of our entire industry as a whole, and that is utilizing analytics type platforms and artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever, you know, language you want to use about fault detection and diagnostics and making building systems even more intelligent, and that transforming the way that ongoing service is delivered to buildings. And what I mean by that is, for time immemorial, the way a typical service contract was fulfilled is, a technician would go out to the site, he'd, dust off the controllers and the computer, and maybe get some compressed air and blow out the keyboard and back up the database and download the latest version of software, check the alarm log, stroke some dampers, look at the temperatures, like might check a few diagnostic things. It's really just a checklist, a non-value added checklist, but that was the best that we could do at that time, right? But now with these analytics platforms that are available in the industry that are a 24/7 technician, that are running advanced algorithms, that are looking at things, several many different variables all at once and comparing them and finding things that frankly no human operator could ever detect, and then being able to apply those into a building so that when a technician goes out to the site, they're not working on a task list. They're working on things that actually bring real real tangible value to a customer, whether that's in, energy efficiency or health, right, in a building, or mechanical life cycle costs, or just mechanical life cycle in general, like equipment longevity, comfort, these kinds of, like, we could prioritize those different things. And so when a technician is going out to a site, they're actually really fixing things and bringing things to a customer. And so that's one of the things that myself and my partner on the operations side of the business, Lawrence Trifoletti, like, we really have this vision for what we've coined impact driven service. In other words, we are delivering service when a technician goes out to a site, they are doing what is delivering the most impact for that visit for the customer. And how do we know what delivers the most impact? Because the analytics platform tells us. And so I believe this is going to transform the entire industry eventually. I think every building is going to have an analytics engine over the top of the building automation system. And we're already beginning to see the transition as well, where I have building operators now. We're seeing fewer and fewer building operators, for one, right? That's another big change in our industry. As buildings have gotten smarter, I'm going to use this, it's going to sound weird, but operators have gotten dumber. Sorry, right? It's like, in other words, no disrespect for our current building engineers who are running complex facilities, but the need for a typical building operator to really understand how the pneumatics work in a building system, and a two pipe versus four pipe, or a heat recovery chiller in the cooling tower. Like, the automation systems have become so advanced now these days that the needed skill level of a building operator is really diminished. And so that's where the analytics platforms can come in and then make up the gap as well. I think they can help bridge that knowledge gap, if you will. It's kind of like, a car now that has the engine code, right, and the computer diagnostic when something's wrong. Used to be you had to have the world's most genius auto mechanic to try to figure out that nuisance problem that nobody else could diagnose. Well, now you have a computer that does it for you, right? And so now your average mechanic is like, I don't know what's wrong. Let me plug the computer in. It's the same kind of thing with building analytics. And so it's really bolstering the industry and getting us to a point to where the buildings will operate themselves more efficiently, and our technicians then can come in and really just work on the things that are value added. So that's one of the things I'm really interested in developing, and I really want to see our industry transform, and I believe that Long is leading that charge. And I mean, that's not a sales pitch. It's like, I don't hear really anyone else talking about this, but we as an organization have more or less stopped selling traditional task-based maintenance. Um, it's just not, we're not even going to market with it. We're like, we're selling analytics, if you will, as our service engine.
So, as vision caster, how do you share that vision and get people on board? How do you enroll those people into that vision and align everyone to make that happen?
It was a struggle. It's been a struggle.
Yeah.
um, here's the thing that we learned along the way. I mean, to drill down on analytics specifically is, again, the importance of salespeople as trusted advisors to
Mm.
customers, and salespeople as someone who are relationship builders. Analytics and that type of fault detection and diagnostic software as an overlay on top of an existing building automation system, I believe, and that we've seen this, is because the value to customers in some ways feels very intangible to begin with, that it's probably something you only get to sell to a customer once.
Mm.
Meaning, if you're like, let me sell you product A, as an analytics platform, and here's the vision, and here's what it does, and here's all the great stuff. Well, if it turns out product A is a piece of garbage, then you can't go back to the customer 3 years later and say, I got product B now. I have a new analytics platform. It's even better and it fixes all these other problems. And customers are going to be like, you burned me on the first one, dude.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't trust you anymore to
Mm.
sell me this stuff. And so, one of the things that it really took was, long as an organization, we've invested in a research and development group. And so, we vetted more than a dozen
Mm.
FDD
Yep.
products before we finally settled on one that we really believe in and that we believe is cutting edge and delivers on the promise of analytics. And um, as in, it doesn't require analyzing the analytics to understand what is really happening. So many of the other platforms we saw require just so much brute force configuration and
Yeah.
programming and setup, and almost to have a full-time operator just to run the analytics. On top of that, a lot of the platforms would spit out just almost kind of raw data that a very technical person would have to sort through again and almost validate that what the analytics engine was finding was in fact a fault or
Mm.
true or real.
You almost needed an analytics platform for your analytics platform.
Even more than that, I needed a human analyst for the analytics platform, right? And so one of the nice things is we settled on a product um, that we really believe in, that has been a really amazing responsive partner for us. I don't know if it's appropriate to share the
Yeah, of
product,
course.
or
Absolutely.
the name of the product is Clockworks. And it's a company that was formed by uh, what I understand, some MIT building analyst grads of some sort. So people way smarter than me. So anyway, they're the ones who built this product, and we've been nothing but thrilled, not only with the technology of the product, but with them as a business partner for us, because it's their product which is really the engine behind our new service offering.
And I was just going to say the people over there are really fantastic people. I know we have several mutual connections between our company and Clockworks, whether they've worked together in the past or they've used Clockworks before. Alex Green is one of those people. I mean, just, very, very solid people that want to do right by customers, and they want to have an awesome platform. They're just fantastic.
Yeah, Alex Grace.
Grace, yes, I'm sorry, Alex Grace. I apologize, Alex. Uh, well, Scott, thank you so much for taking this time. Again, I so
Mm,
appreciate it. And the whole vision for this podcast is to hear what people's stories are and to hear the names of the people that kind of
mm,
came alongside you,
yeah.
and how you're trying to empower your team and how you're looking for those right people. And people that are listening are also asking themselves those same questions. It's like, where are the opportunities for me, and where can I go, and what are the things that I need to develop?
Mm,
And we I think hit on so many absolute key metrics on that. And you're also approaching this from this vision standpoint of where the industry's going and trying to lead it, while also building a team of experts and professionals and partnering with the right people. And because of that, I absolutely see you as a building genius, absolutely in the vein and the spirit of this podcast.
mm.
You did it. That's the
Yes.
second time now
Yes.
someone's called you a genius. And but no, I thank you. I appreciate your spirit and your attitude and everything you're doing to try to move this forward, and then also just being partners with us. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be invited on the podcast. I've just You guys at KMC have just always been tremendous partners, through thick and thin and through the struggles. And I, Mitch and you have always held up your end, even when things haven't gone right, and things don't always go right. And so I'm just very grateful for our partnership and to be invited on here and to share just my experience. And I hope someone gets some value out of it. And I'm going to celebrate the rest of the day now that I've been officially declared a building
Yeah,
genius.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Well, that wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast, a production of KMC Controls. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe and share it. And if there's anyone that you know who you think should be on the podcast, tag them in the comments below or reach out to us on social. We'll tag them in the comments and bug them. And as always, we appreciate you listening. Until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.